A question of time. Time past, time future, both inaccessible at all times. Time present. For Michael Schliemann, fading fast. These words of prophecy were spoken by a woman of the Cree Indian nation in the 19th century, a shamanette. Her name translates as Eyes of Fire. Her eyes of fire are still watching us now. Mark Twain described the city of Vienna while he was living here in the 19th century as that laboratory of apocalypse. He wrote in his memoirs at the time, "It is best to tell the truth only when nothing else occurs to you." It was just before midnight. I was on the Ringstrasse tram. I was visiting Vienna to give a lecture about my new book, Opium and the Psychopathic Mind of Modern Man.
The Rainbow Warrior looked a tragic sight today as it lay tilted against Marsden Wall.
There was the question of history, memory, memoirs. A dream of entering the stillness of time, beyond words, beyond thought, freedom from movement in space, freedom from montage, the cut, the edit, freedom from drifting, endless, endless drifting. I'd seen a pretty girl on the tram. I was travelling on the Ringstrasse tram, number 1. Either number 1 or number 2, I can't remember now. When I was called by my ex-controller at MI6, Maxa, she asked if I was in Vienna. I said no, I was in Cairo. She insisted she had a perfect assignment for me, but I reminded her I had to finish my new novel, Terrorism, considered as one of the fine arts. Maybe that's how this story began, if I remember correctly. But Maxa insisted there was a special job for me, perfect for me. I was to infiltrate a terrorist cell of eco-terrorists who were hell-bent on murder and assassination. A bunch of girls, pretty girls. My first task was to find the leader of this anarchic terrorist cell. French intelligence in Paris, who'd been following her and lost her, suspected she'd gone to Vienna, doing research into a science project. Which is why they suspected that I might be the perfect person to find her. The girl was apparently very beautiful, a ruthless terrorist with a PhD in anarchism from Algiers University. She'd killed 2 intelligence agents in a shootout at the Sacré-Cœur Cathedral in Paris. Email intercepts by the French Echelon network suggested she was planning the assassination of a top French intelligence agent from the terrorist wing. Later I discovered he was a minister in the French government, dealing with nuclear power. The French have used the Echelon network surveillance satellite to infiltrate Lenoir's emails to all her girlfriends. All her girlfriends have the name Maria. She quotes cult movies, poetry, her memoirs, arias from classical opera, lyrics from punk rock music. She often talked about time and space, history and memory. She spoke of holographic time and space and the physics of entanglement. Until I realized it was probably a different Maria. I had merely fallen into her trap, assuming that all the Marias were one Maria. She often spoke of La Ronde. Her girlfriend's favorite film was The Third Man. It was just before midnight. Fernando Pereira was in the boat when the first bomb exploded. He and the other Greenpeace activists managed to escape as the boat was sinking. But Fernando rushed back to get his camera to film this callous sabotage. The fatal move. The second bomb exploded. And as his friends watched the Rainbow Warrior sinking, Fernando Pereira was drowned, murdered by 5 French intelligence agents, posing as tourists on fake Swiss passports. I sent my favorite student from Cambridge, Marilyn, to Cairo with my secret computer, instructions to put my memoirs onto the internet if I died. Dearest Maria, we must all be extra vigilant in these final dog days. Revenge clouds vision. When you shoot to kill, your eyes can blur. You see 2 people at once, 2 transparent screens hovering over each other. You kill one, but you kill 2, like in a hologram. The Japanese say that if you're planning revenge, prepare 2 coffins. In their haiku poetry, the Japanese have what they call a pivot word. At the end of the line, it ends the line. But it has 2 meanings. It also starts the next line. 1 word, 2 meanings, 2 locations in time. Each meaning interfering, entangled with the other. As indeed, as you said, like 2 lost lovers reading Plato. We will meet soon. E12 222 X. My love, Maria. Lenoir quoted a fragment of her manifesto. She spoke of this desire for revenge. As in my memoirs, our two stories were entangled. Her assassination, a bleak story of incest, and my memoirs, an equally blank, bleak narrative exposing moral betrayal by the state. She and I encircling each other like two particles in the separate wings of a cyclotron, moving nearer and nearer to death, at the speed of light, far from the comfort of the cave, being watched by eyes of fire. Two networks of thought in a single split mind, heading for the moment of inevitable fatal head-on impact and fusion. No photographs of Maria Lenoir exist, except one, taken in the grounds of the Sacré-Cœur Cathedral in Paris late at night. Unfortunately, her face obliterated by the bright floodlights. Fortunately, I figured out that she was meeting her girlfriends on the Ringstrasse trams, either number 1 going east or number 2 going west. A careless remark led me to my first suspect. One of the Marias had written that she was still desperately in love with her Anna, as well as Anna K. and Anna S. She was falling apart, referred to her film museum. I suspected it must be the city's Third Man Museum, devoted to the history of the iconic film's production in post-war Vienna. The cinema's dislocation of time and space, the freezing of history, and yet the transcendence of history. Not needing to forget, and yet needing to forget. A university student was working there part-time, taking tours of visitors to see the present-day film locations.
We stop a bit later on. Usually you...
Yes, it's fine.
I was excited. I worked it out. The name of her victim, Nightingale. I knew the book. Herr Nachtigall and the Satin Woman. There were other code books. Nadja by André Breton. The Blind Owl by Sede Hediat. Nora And by Juna Barnes. A Night in Vienna by Holly Martin. Dearest Maria, from the horizontal to the vertical? No. We walk. Birds fly.
Good evening. Dr. Schliemann has asked me to read a few words before he begins. For me, the time for action is over. I have aged. The time for a reflection begins.
Goddard says it was the French mathematician Jean-Victor Poncelet, alone in his Russian prison cell, going mad, going round and round and round, inventing the principles of projection. We too will create history, a spectacle never to be forgotten. Herr Nachtigall, blown to smithereens in the sacred forest. You are singing the nightingale? Wonderful. W31 435. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I found this today.
Goodness me, I haven't seen one of those for 30 years.
Yeah. I had Made in USA, remember?
I remember.
It's especially cool because it's got commentaries in it. Some person, some, film expert owned this, made all these notes. It's all this red marking all over it. Very specific marking. It's like reading two books, You have two different realities. You have two different perceptions, mine and hers. This woman who owned it. Would you like me to read some of the markings?
How do you know it's her?
Her name's in it. Maria Lenoir, 28 Boltzmannstraße. No, it's Marianne Renoir. Marianne Renoir.
But you said it was Maria, not Marianne.
Marianne. It's Marianne. Marianne Renoir. First thing, for me, the time for action is over. I have aged. The time for reflection begins. If the modern novel is a fear of the blank page, modern painting is fear of the blank canvas. Why shouldn't modern cinema be fear of the camera, fear of the dialogue, fear of the actors, fear of the montage? This woman was writing a dissertation on fear. Because here's what the next thing is. Close up. Newspaper placard. More terrorist attacks. 1960. Nothing's changed.
Look what I found today.
Is it the same picture?
And that's the newspaper today.
Has said, film is like a personal diary, a notebook or a monologue by someone who tries to justify himself before a camera that is almost an accuser, like one does before a lawyer or a psychiatrist.
I suspected that Lenoir was meeting her girlfriends on the Ringstrasse tram. How did I know it was you?
Just met a colleague of mine. We can't walk through the park, actually, it's locked.
It's closed at this time of night. So I decided to make my mobile office there. Keep moving, never still, far from spying eyes. Tram 1 was the past for me. Tram 2, the future. Drifting, editing the montage of the shifting, immaterial world. Tram 1 memory. Tram 2 imagination. Two streetcars of unrequited desire following the same enslaved journey in opposite directions, incessantly encircling the Ringstrasse, in parallel but never meeting, as in a fraught virtual love affair.
If the modern novel is a fear of the blank page, modern painting is fear of the blank canvas, why shouldn't modern cinema be fear of the camera, fear of the dialogue, fear of the actors, fear of the montage?
Dear Maria, don't forget, the cinema is stories of sex and death. Schliemann has the answer. What kind of a spy are you?
What kind of a spy do you think you are?
Central forward.
What are you telling people? Back at your tongue?
Come on out.
Come out, wherever you are.
Who do you think you are?
What kind of a spy do you think you are, Satchelfoot? What are you tailing me for? Cat got your tongue? Let's step out in the light and have a look at you. Come on out. Come out, wherever you are. In an unknown location to us. It could be up here, it could be over there, it could be over there. The fact is, a beam of light hits the doorway, illuminating this moon-like face, this kind of babyish, childlike ghost face of Orson Welles with that smirk. And for Holly Martins, of course, it's as if, you know, he has seen a ghost. It's an apparition. His best friend, who is dead, is standing in that doorway. And he jerks up, tries to walk over to the doorway. A car comes down, and by the time he reaches the doorway, it's empty, you know, as if he just imagined it because he's been drunk and all. So he follows the footsteps, the running footsteps, and still sees a shadow. And he runs after the shadow and ends up in some other place in Vienna, which just shows that film, you know, doesn't play by the rules of space, can make, you know, quantum leaps.
Some of you were shot in London.
Yes, some of this, well, no exterior shots were shot in London, except for the sewers, but that, you know, that's debatable whether that's exterior. But most of the interior shots were shot in London, such as the bedroom of Anna Schmidt. That was shot in London. Near her house. It was shot in Vienna, but the insides of the house, her bedroom, there's a view of the city from her bedroom, which is all studio made, matte painting, you know. Ovens, doorknobs, curtains, which are the essence of place. And they are seen in these studio recreations of Vienna, which in those days was quite unusual.
Vienna was coming back.
I mean,
from the
especially
dead.
for Hollywood production. I mean, The Third Man is partially a Hollywood production, and in those days, Hollywood productions didn't make a great effort to present place, unless it was a film noir, in which case they often used, you know, near-realism. But in this case, The Third Man is the quintessential, near-realistic, Hollywood, half British, half American, European film noir. It's near-realism. It's everything.
According to Goddard, these are some of the elements that are common to memory and to film. Crystals, palimpsest, refraction, echo, flash, holograms, interference, dissonance, Thomas de Quincey, his memoirs. This whole narrative resembles, and was meant to resemble, a caduceus wreathed about with meandering ornaments, or the shaft of a tree's stem hung around and surrounded with some vagrant, parasitical plant. I was invited by the Holly Martins Pulp Fiction Society to give a talk at the Third Man Museum. To talk about my new novel, Terrorism Considered as One of the Fine Arts. To talk about addiction to fear, that sense of being trapped in labyrinths of deceit and uncertainty. De Quincey's endless search for his past, for the love in his past, for Anne, in the dark labyrinths of the city. Seeing her face everywhere, but nowhere. A mere image on a screen, inside his mind, inside his dream, his tortured, fearful dreams. We cannot avoid talking about music, Maria. Your music, my music. For me, music is like memory. For you, memory is cinema. But we have a common project, dealing with history, dealing with memory. The murder of Fernando Pereira by the French government must not be forgotten. And we will create an image that will go out on the internet, which will make it quite clear why we have killed who we will kill. Perhaps our music and our art is the creation of a mandala, a space, a sacred space in which we will understand each other and meditate upon what we are doing, knowing that at some point, one of us, sitting in a circle, one of us will walk out of that circle into the snow, into the solitude, into the necessity of action. No longer talking, no longer creating seductive images, creating an image perhaps of horror that people will fear to look at, but people will know that this time the cause of Fernando Pereira was just. I will come to your concert tomorrow, of course, but I will not speak to you, of course. My love, Maria. I wanted to talk about retreating, running away. I wanted to talk about my memoirs that were not quite finished, and I had no more time to finish them because I had to find Maria Lenoir before she killed herself. I didn't want to talk about history and memory. History and memory were no longer my agenda. My new project was a kind of hallucination, a dream that had to be realized. The night before my lecture, I had been reading Maria Lenoir's manifesto, part of which she had sent in an email to one of her girlfriends, describing the death of Fernando Pereira. Dearest Maria, a few words from Thomas de Quincey. If merely to be present at a murder fastens on a man the character of an accomplice, if barely to be a spectator involves us in one common guilt with the perpetrator, it follows of necessity that in these murders of the amphitheatre, the hand which inflicts the fatal blow is not more deeply imbrued in blood than his who passively looks on. Neither can he be clear of blood who has countenanced its shedding, nor that man seem other than a participator in murder who gives his applause to the murderer and calls for prizes on his behalf. Hi, how are you? Cold today.
Yes, that's cool.
So, this is it. Tell me the
yes.
story.
All right. It's what I usually do. This is Harry Lyme's apartment. You know, it's where Holly Martins first arrives in Vienna. Come on over. He was murdered just about here, they tell him. You know, they say he was murdered just outside his door. And I suppose they filmed inside they filmed inside the apartment as well. One night I was walking by here in the middle of the night and I looked up and there was this porter standing in the window cleaning the window. And I shouted up to him saying, "Did they film inside the palace itself?" And he said, "Yeah." And if you look in, you can see some of those, gilt decorations, which you can see in the film. I mean, I heard that the inside of Harry Lyme's apartment was not reproduced in the studio. So I assume it...
Sorry, what? It was what?
It was not reproduced in the studio, because they filmed many of the indoor locations in London, but I think that scene they filmed in there. He walks in and his friend's been murdered, and this is exactly how it looked in the film. You even have the toes. For me it's exciting, but I know many people don't like it.
Why?
Oh, it's dark. And
You mean Austrians don't like it?
Hardly any Austrians ever come to the museum, and it touches something, you don't want to talk about.
The past?
Mm-hmm.
The war?
The war.
Dearest Maria, tonight, my love, Maria. So what did Maria say? These sisters of sorrow, they utter their pleasure not by sounds that perish, or by words that go astray, but by signs in heaven, by changes on earth, by pulses in secret rivers, heraldries painted on darkness, and hieroglyphics written on the tablets of the brain. They wheeled in mazes. I spelled the steps. They telegraphed from afar. I read the signals. They conspired together. And on the mirrors of darkness my eye traced the plots. Theirs were the symbols. Mine were the words. But the third sister, whisper while we talk of her. She is the defier of God. She is the mother of lunacies and the suggestress of suicides. and her name is Our Lady of Darkness. The final purpose of murder, considered as a fine art, is the same as that of tragedy in Aristotle's account: to cleanse the heart by means of pity and terror. Now terror there may be, but how can there be any pity for one tiger destroyed by another tiger? The world in general, gentlemen, are very bloody-minded, and all they want in a murder is a copious effusion of blood. Dearest Maria, I quote for you. Hear you not the rushing sound of the coming tempest? Do you not behold the clouds open, and destruction, lurid and dire, pour down on the blasted earth? Feel you not the earth quake and open with agonizing groans, while the air is pregnant with shrieks and wailing, all announcing the last days of man? The wind crying Mary. The quote is Mary Shelley, her final novel, The Last Maria, the last man. If it was obvious even then, 200 years ago, that the earth was being raped and murdered by the Industrial Revolution, Blake's Satanic Mills, why this apparent horror now? What will we grow from poisoned and dead soil? The earth's natural resources dying, like our bodies, so fast that they can never be restored, our poisoned bodies. Love, not greed. In despair, Maria. People begin to see that something more goes to the composition of a good murder than two blockheads to kill and be killed, a knife, a purse, and a dark lane. Design, gentlemen, lighting, light and shade, poetry, sentiment are now deemed indispensable to attempts of this nature. But murder can also be treated aesthetically, as the Germans call it, that is, in relation to good taste. The first murder in history is familiar to you all. As the inventor of murder, Cain must have been a man of first-rate genius. But to come to the Dark Ages, they ought to be favourable to the art of murder, as they were to church architecture and stained glass. And accordingly, at the end of this period, there arose a great character in our art, the Old Man of the Mountains. He was a shining light indeed. And I need not tell you, the very word assassin is deduced from him. Dearest Maria, all revolution is an attempt to reverse history. Can it ever succeed fully? We must make history, you know that. I am already dead. The domain of dismembered memory, free from the desire to repeat. My own brain endlessly recycling images and words. Who is the director of this dream? I am racked on a wheel, as if my brain knows more than I do. What it decides must be recalled, remembered. What has been dismembered, remembered. Scenes that torment us become recurring dreams. Look, 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 said the birds. This question is unsettled. Museums. Yes, history and museums. Monuments in stone. Dearest Maria, you must not now fall into despair. Time is running out for us. It is always darkest before the dawn. But of course I will come to your performance, but we must not be seen to speak. There are eyes everywhere. Music becomes you. Close your eyes if you do not want to see them watching you. But the artist must always exploit the public gaze. Otherwise his art is sterile, barren, not sacred. It must be sacrificial. Art must transform others, not merely the artist. A self-loss, suicide fused with murder. Like Sassoon's suicide in the trenches. It must be a cry for help. I despise the public gaze of today, corrupted by the media. Terrorism and art must fuse. Each must feed off the other. Writing, poetry, making music, making films. Images on screens are barely valuable now, except as the first stage of initiation. The hoi polloi and their cultivated, self-destroying greed. Once they are before that screen, subject to it, paralyzed, their inner mind's eyes are blank, petrified that the screen will no longer need them, desire them, their gaze, their money. The screen must be incandescent. We must wage war on their screens. Embody our age in images on their screens, yes, but our images. To revenge Gaia and restore her to her throne. I know that fear, I know that terror. You know that I know that fear, that terror. The inescapable aura of foreboding. And our music, it augments the panic, evolving in all directions. Like a huge, visceral, decaying web of empty cellular cages, into which I imagine Fernando falling towards an infinitely dark space at its center, reminding him of one of the images that Giordano Bruno had drawn to illustrate the relation of the map of consciousness to that of the universe. Circles within circles within circles. What is here is there, as Hermes Trismegistus knew. He'd been there, powered by the wings on his feet. That was Fernando, eyes of fire and wings on his feet. I was starting to make the necessary connections between the various girls. I was getting close. Close to the center of the web, to Maria Lenoir, to discover which of the girls was Maria Lenoir.
Evening, Nina. Immer in der Früh um 5.
And we are playing 3 times in different places. We always play twice for each place, and it's a festival about documentaries on stage, which is very interesting, I think, a very interesting idea. And we're going to play Darwin's Nightmare on stage. It's a documentary about a documentary film about a fish which was introduced into a lake in Tanzania in Africa, and this fact that this fish was placed into this lake destroyed the whole
Ecosystem.
Yeah, there. So the people, there's on one hand the people have to work because they built many factories there, and so the people have a lot of work because the fish is transported to Europe, but on the other hand they don't have to eat, so it's a kind of globalization effect, which on one hand it's good, on the other hand it's very bad. It destroyed everything. Everything was, everything that was, natural there.
Start diving. And when you ask him what he's doing there in the water, then he will answer you what he's doing there. It is to follow the fish. Squeeze the fish. Squeeze the fish until the fish go into the net. Ah! Yeah. And someplace here there's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ihr Mann ist auch gestorben. Das Virus hat ihn getötet. Sie hatte 3 Kinder. Als das Jüngste starb, erkannte sie, dass sie selbst krank ist. Ihre Kinder sind jetzt allein.
Her husband came from the outcast, fishing for the fish factories.
Was hat er vorher gemacht? Er war Bauer.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like... Thank you. I would like now to go out to the people of Tanzania. I would like you to stand up. To wave. Thank you. Thank you very much.
It was just before midnight when the first bomb exploded. Most of the Rainbow Warriors' crew escaped. But Fernando decided to go back into the boat to rescue his camera, to take photographs of this monstrous act of destruction, of state terrorism by the French government. When the second bomb exploded, Fernando was still inside the boat, holding his camera. The water flooded in to the boat, and as the boat sank, Fernando, dreaming of becoming a bird, died.
California, über alles. California, über alles. Über alles. California, über alles.
He had written a letter earlier in the day to his girlfriend in Paris, Maria Lenoir, telling her how as the Rainbow Warrior came towards the South Seas, They were followed by a lone albatross, following them, and he wondered if one day he might take a photograph of the last albatross, flying over a boat. He had written a letter earlier in the day to his girlfriend in Paris, Maria Lenoir, telling her how as the Rainbow Warrior came towards the South Sea, they were followed by a lone albatross, following them, and he wondered if one day he might take a photograph of the last albatross, flying over a boat. A fishing boat, probably, scavenging the seas, ravaging the seas, destroying the last breeding stocks of some essential, apparently essential food for humans' greed. A short time after the Rainbow Warrior boat was sunk and Fernando Pereira was murdered, 5 French intelligence agents were arrested. Eventually they were prosecuted for the outrage and given 10 years imprisonment, which they failed to serve. Sometime later, the French government's nuclear test in the South Pacific was successfully performed. A magnificent spectacle and embodiment of power and fear. The Rainbow Warrior boat lying dead in the water. The French exploding their necessary nuclear device over an island depopulated. In the sky, a wheel of light, eyes of fire. Fernando's dream of becoming a white bird, now mysteriously fused with another image, which seemed to him to be of a young girl dancing in the sky. Whose name was Nature's Child.